Hello there. I'm here having a virtual cuppa with Ted Bonel, business coach from Strategy and Execution Advisors. Ted is a certified scaling up coach or Rockefeller Habits coach from that book by Vern Harnish. Also an E-Myth certified coach as well. Ted's been coaching for 20 years. Before that, he was CEO of a successful startup that he took to the stock exchange. So thought Ted had some very interesting insights into the current world. How's it going, Ted?
Very good. Very interesting times for all of us. But they're challenging, but there's opportunities.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the things I want to talk to you really was, I suppose what you're seeing out there in the market. And obviously, you've in your career, you've coached some of Australia's fastest growing companies. Number of companies have been named on the best places to work list. A number of companies have been let on the fast growing companies list. I mean, what are you finding out there? What are your clients talking about? What are those sort of frequently asked questions you're getting asked? Sort of common themes you're seeing?
Well, particularly in this time, Simon, what I see possibly, there's probably two key ones. And one is that they come to me in terms of, first of all, what should they focus on? Because in terms of, to some extent, this has paralyzed people. And because there's no playbook for this. This is the first time this has happened. There's no sort of step-by-step guide in doing this. So what to focus on? And what I advise clients to do is that because things are so changing so rapidly, it's a global issue. It's suppliers, customers, competitors. We don't know how long it's going to be. It's constantly moving. Everyday changes. We need to be agile. And we don't really know what the new normal is going to look like when we get out to the end.
Yeah.
But also, we've got to remember there's things that are controllable and uncontrollable. And I think that's key. There's things that we can control that we really should focus on. There's uncontrollable stuff. I think once you break it like that, it can become simpler to actually then focus, okay, what do I put my attention to?
Yeah.
And this comes down to, in terms of what I advise clients to do, is actually start to split up in terms of, okay, break it down into 4 time periods. This week, because things are changing. Next week, we don't really know. So what can we do this week? And what can we do then in the second time period is 2 to 4 weeks. The third time period is 1 to 2 quarters, and then probably 1 to 2 years. Because what they're talking about is international flying may not start till 2023. A vaccine, there's a lot of optimistic. People said we'd have it in 1 month. People said we'll have it by the end of the year. People say 18 months, etc. So we don't know. So break it down to that, and then start to look at it in these by department. Start to look at your actions by breaking down your business into relevant components and actions for each. Marketing, what do we need to do? Sales, production, either product or services, warehouse, distribution, finance, accounts receivable, cash, funding. We need to stress test our business around these things. Our people, who are the A players? And I know I'll keep repeating this theme, is that this is an ideal opportunity where we need to look at who are the B's and the C's and move the C's on. Because here's an ideal opportunity where there are people out there that weren't there that are potential A players that we could recruit in our business. So that's one thing in terms of what to focus on. So breaking it down in those components. And the other thing that has come out clearly is that, okay, motivating our existing staff, motivating engagement and focusing our staff. Because there's so much negative news out there, so much negativity. And this is where leadership needs to come out. And we talk about, we need to get back to the basics of, we call it clarity, in terms of things that remain constant, like purpose and values. Bringing it back to our purpose, our values. Our purpose is, what are we here for? What's this business here to do? Why do we get up in the morning? And the leader's role is to over-communicate this. And that's going to give, to some extent, help our people become focused in terms of why they're here. Because to some extent, your purpose is like, it's your brand. It's what you do. Let's eliminate that noise, those distractions. What are we here to do? And what's our values? They're the fundamentals. And that's how you're going to get engaged staff and also focused staff. And you're going to get them in terms of more motivated if leaders come out and start to over-communicate. So over-communicate comes down to what we call our meeting cadences. Regular meetings, daily huddles, weekly meetings, monthly meetings. It's the role of the leaders, the executive team, to keep reinforcing these things.
So that, I mean, obviously the layers and the pyramid from the Rockefeller habits and scaling up, obviously those are all sort of common themes there. Are you finding that the businesses in the panic of this are losing sight of some of those fundamentals they would have implemented? Is that occurring, or are people tending to move away from that, or are they holding fast to those principles?
When I work with organizations, and no matter how long they've used scaling up a Rockefeller habit, some are really, really good, but some actually lose what we call the execution disciplines. And when I audit businesses and I go into them, they've lost in terms of what's important, which we call priorities. So execution disciplines are priorities, metrics, and meeting rhythms. What's important today, this week? So again, if we go back to what I talked about before, breaking down our actions into 4 time periods, what's important this week? Okay, what's important 2 to 4 weeks? We need to consider that, but let's focus on today and this week. And the only way that's going to happen is by having those daily huddles, but also having those leading indicators, the metrics. What are the numbers telling us? Absolutely. This execution disciplines is what people, it's almost the first thing, oh, we've got other things to focus on. Let's move away from that and let's get into the weeds, the stuff. Yeah. And the stuff actually bogs you down because it doesn't give you, you're in the whirlwind. It doesn't give you sort of priorities in terms of what's important. So we're trying to do 20 things where we should only focus on the critical few things, almost the high impact things. And this is something I talk about. Focus on the high impact activities. And you can only do that by corralling people to understand what's important. Forget about that. Do this. There's almost the things that we say that you should stop doing. And stop doing low value tasks. Almost stop doing things that don't make money. Money marketing activities. What's money marketing activity in this business? And I know every business is different, but focus on those things rather than getting distracted and spinning wheels. And this is where I talk about there's controllable and uncontrollable. Don't worry about the uncontrollable stuff. What can we do? What can that individual do? What can that leadership do? What can that department do that's controllable?
Yeah. I think one of the things for me with the scaling up time frame is obviously it talks about the 2 critical times being the next 90 days and 10 years are the 2 critical time frames. But it seems that one of the biggest changes I've seen is that the critical time has gone from 3, you can realistically predict the next 90 days roughly. That seems to be more like about 90 minutes at the moment, or at least a week is how long you can sort of predict what's going to happen. And the 10-year thing is brought down to more so like 2-3 years just to sort of still be here in that time. You're finding that rate of change is quicker?
Absolutely. And look, when people are well read, they listen to the news, and some of it is positive, but most of it is negative because bad news sells and travels fast. But in terms of strategy, and this is why we've got to think about week and being a week, 2 weeks, a quarter, and being agile. There's a strategic thought that you got to stick to your core. That's almost like a strategy that's always been fundamental. Stick to your core. Stick to what you know best. Stick to what you're good at. And in this particular time, this needs to be parked during this challenging time. And as you see in organizations that have pivoted to where's the money and gone from, because they don't have revenue or business, have actually gone into something completely different, making ventilators. Even McDonald's, their core is hamburgers and fast food, but they've gone into selling bread, milk, basics, etc. that people need.
So it's nice they're selling farm fresh eggs.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's where the money is. That's where the need is. So we need to look at what are our customers' pain points. And to some extent, it may not be what you're good at. It may be something that you need to pivot to drive some revenue for the business.
I think pivot is one of the words. And there's a few words that have come to the fore during the crisis that you hear a lot that you wouldn't normally hear. And pivot is definitely, I think I've heard the word pivot more than the last 6 weeks, and I've heard the rest of my life put together, I think. But how are businesses doing? Okay, if you're a business and you think, okay, we need, our core market isn't making us money, we need to pivot into a related market or where there is money. What are the key things a business needs to do to kind of hold true to who they are whilst pivoting? That's quite a difficult question.
We'll probably, it may come down to their purpose in terms of what are they here to do. That might drive in terms of, and don't be focused just on the products or services that you've always done. As an example, leading up to Easter, there was a manufacturer in metal manufacturing. Their sales just went down. So their pivot was, and look, people know this, gym equipment is pretty hard to get. So they pivoted to making gym equipment. They've been flat out because you can't get it.
Yeah.
So that's a pivot. We talked about McDonald's as a pivot. We talked about the airlines in terms of all the stuff. Okay, what can we do? Coles and Woolworths have sucked up a lot of their staff. We talk about even restaurants, etc. They've gone to not being able to serve food. Yes, they're doing takeaways, but also what they're doing is having their counters where they can supply fresh fruit and vegetables to get some revenue coming in.
Yeah.
So as I said, what you're good at as a strategy needs to be parked, and we need to look at what do our customers want? What do people want? What will they pay for? And we've got to be careful. One thing that we've got to be careful about is be careful about discounting, because that's going down a slippery slope. Whatever we do, if it's a product or service and it's still selling but not to the same volumes, try and give more value.
Yeah.
And we need also to look at maybe explore new value propositions by giving more value. And that comes back to what I said, focus on high payoff activities. Almost talk to your most important customers, understand and solve their problems. Don't treat every customer the same. Every customer's got a particular need. As an example, there's a client and they've got an overseas branch in the US. They imported, in the US, they imported a 747, and they got together with other companies, of hand sanitizers and masks and distributed it through their client base. That created so much goodwill for the business. The Australian company, smaller, imported, but not a 747 load full of hand sanitizers and masks, etc. And they just, again, clients love them because there's a short supply in Australia.
Yeah.
So it's about pivoting. And it gave in Australia, it gave them an entry point for new customers, an entry point to actually talk about, hey, where's the potential? So it created a lot of goodwill for this organization.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a minute ago, we were talking about before, around negativity out there in the media, social media, and conversations from within teams. When you hear a lot of people saying, oh, there's no work, and there are obviously a lot of really tragic stories out there, and a lot of businesses that very unjustly have got under or really suffered. But there's also a lot of positivity that gets a lot less airtime. What sort of research, what sort of information from within your network, from within the sort of the access to information you have that the people watching this would be interested in?
Okay, and I'll take this from clients that I'm working with. So just this morning I was talking to a real estate principal of offices in Sydney. And as you know, you talk to the media, everything's just so negative, down, prices are going to crash, people aren't buying and all this stuff, etc. He's not far off doing the same figures as last year. As I said, bad news travels fast, bad news sells, etc. So it's not as negative. So that's just a real estate. Another client in Sydney who's got a chain of tire stores. He's not far off last year's figures.
Yeah.
And when you look at that period, people didn't go on, because Easter was one of his biggest areas. He has an Easter promotion for his stores, etc. So people didn't travel because they couldn't travel because there was lockdowns. But still, his sales weren't that far off last year. So I understand that there are businesses, industries that aren't doing well, but there's a lot of industries that are doing well, and there's a lot of industries that haven't suffered that much. But they still have to take, and we talked about this before, about the Stockdale principle that Jim Collins talks about. We've got to confront the brutal facts. We've got to face the brutal facts about what's going on, and we've got to take action on those. But also we've got to be optimistic about the future. We're going to come out of this, and I'll suggest the people who survive will actually thrive better than what they were before this COVID crisis.
I think the interesting thing I took from watching Jim Collins talk about the Stockdale paradox was that if anyone hasn't read that, I want to talk about now, but definitely read up on it. It's an interesting story. But when I asked the guy how he survived and other people didn't survive the experience he went through being a prisoner of war, is he said the people who didn't survive were the optimists, the people who will be out of here by Christmas, won't be out of here by Christmas, Christmas comes and goes, we'll be out of here by next Christmas, and we won't be out of here by Christmas, we don't know when we'll be out, facing those brutal facts, but having that not blind optimism, but the sort of stoic faith that you will survive and you will prevail. You won't just survive, you will prevail and make this a defining moment in your existence. But that was a really interesting part of the, not blind optimism, but confidence that you will survive it no matter what.
And when we talk about confront the brutal facts, right early in this crisis, I advise a lot of clients in terms of a couple of things. In terms of cash flow is important. So we need to make sure that we right size the business. We need to make sure that we go lean in terms of everything that we're doing, but also build what Jim Collins talks about, oxygen tanks. Access whatever assistance that you can and build up cash, because as I said, we don't know. There's no playbook for this. So it's best to go early and go hard in these things now. That's one thing. Also, in terms of looking at in terms of your people, if you're going to right size the business, make sure you look after the, what we call the A players, the people who, you know, are the people that you want to keep. Look after them. But also, this is an ideal time where you need to start to consider, if you've got people who are toxic or negative to the organization, now's the time to let them go, because there's good people out there. So go and recruit and find good people that will strengthen your business. This is not a time to tolerate underperformers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, if you, I suppose if you had, from what you've witnessed, companies that are doing well at the moment, or companies you're confident are going to survive, what would be the, you know, business owner now, a manager of a team now, what would be those real low-hanging fruits that you would say, these are the easy things to do now, just to maximize your opportunities?
I'd come back to execution disciplines, and part of that is meet more rapidly, because this is a rapidly changing environment in terms of the business. So rather than having daily huddles, maybe have 2 huddles a day. And especially as we've got remote workers or people working from home, I think it's important that we have accelerate that meeting cadence, because otherwise, you know, people feel that they're being left behind and neglected. So execution disciplines, certainly that's going to give you a quick win. We'll also then come back to in terms of, you know, and look, we do this exercise, and I know I've spoken about top grading, but you can have less people, if they're A players, doing the same amount or better work than a whole heap of A, Bs, and Cs. If you've got a lot of A players, more A players, no C players, you've got more output. Less people, paid a little bit more, you're going to have a better outcome. So this is the time to actually, your quick win is remove the people who are toxic or don't add value to the business. And that's going to help you not only survive, but also thrive when you come out of this. Because here's an opportunity to find good talent, because they're out there. This is almost a slice in time where recruit good people because they've been let go.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, when you sort of sat, glass of red wine, mulling things over, what does the other side of this look like for you? What do you see, you know, the biggest negative change, or more importantly, the biggest positive changes you see will happen in the world because of this crisis?
Well,
on the other side.
Long-term trends, and again, one of the things that I advise clients is that you've got to go digital. If you can, you've got to go digital. If you've resisted digital, go more online, trying to have as much of your stuff online. This is a time to invest. If there's one place where you invest money, it'll be in terms of digital and online.
Yeah.
As we discussed before this call, remote working and a digital economy, I think this has accelerated the future. Where people thought remote work was impossible or negative, or they couldn't see it working, people have actually accelerated that. So I think this is probably advanced working remotely by 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
I also believe in terms of automation will be one thing where things are automated. less customer contact, less hands doing things and more automation. But also on the negative side, I think there's a wild card out there, and that is our dealings with China.
Yeah.
And if China pulls the plug on what we're selling them, etc., that's going to have a detrimental effect through the whole economy, more than what the COVID crisis has generated.
Yeah.
And we've got to overcome that. And I believe, don't want to bring politics into it, but I'll just probably leave it there at that point. But yeah, certainly offline retail to e-commerce, remote working and digital economy, factory automation or automation in any way possible. And also probably you're starting to see this is transition from cash-based to electronic payment technologies. So, this COVID crisis has accelerated a lot of technological change in our environment, in our working and daily life.
Yeah, I think that's going to have a huge impact on company cultures, diversity within the workplace. I mean, people have access to more workers, people with physical disabilities, people who need to work from home for flexibility needs, all those things are going to, businesses will have access to more people that have those needs as well, I think. It's going to be interesting.
And then less office space.
Yeah, less office space and...
so lowering our fixed costs.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start admiring your book collection now. I've got a few of those as well. If you were to say to someone now, business owner, they've got a bit of spare time, what's the one book you would recommend them reading right now you think will bring the most value through this crisis?
That's a hard one.
I know, I knew that would stump you.
That is a real hard one. One book, I think, well, probably there is one. If there's a simple book, and to some extent it's business and personal related, and we haven't talked about this, and not to be a promoter of books, and this is just something that's on my desk that I'm reading at the moment. So it's called Elevate, and it's got push beyond your limits and unlock success in yourself and others. Nice, simple book, nice sort of action steps in each one of those. And as I said, it's not, you could say it's business and also personal related, but it's a really good book, and it's probably gone on to one of the best sellers on the New York stock list, etc. So yeah, that's one thing that I'm reading at the moment that I thought was probably not as heavy as a business book, but Elevate by Robert Glazer.
Okay. No, I've not read that one. I think my pick would probably be Great by Choice. I think if anyone hasn't read that, I think would be just the stories of businesses that thrive through adversity, difficult times, and have survived and become amazing. I think that's quite an inspiring book.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. If every book, I'm a believer that it doesn't matter what book. If you get one or two gems out of that, you've done well.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right, Ted, look, awesome to speak to you. Thanks very much for having a virtual cuppa with me. Some really good nuggets of information there. Thank you very much for your time, Ted.
Thank you, Simon. A pleasure.